The fire at Fen Hollow had gone out twice that week, and Thomas and Caro had lit it again both times without mentioning it to anybody. She was at the long table in the back parlor, which was the only room in the house that had ever held heat properly, and she was working through the quarter accounts with a pen she had cut herself that morning. The ledger was old. Her father had kept it badly for 19 years, and she had kept it well for 6, and the difference showed in the columns the way a mended fence shows against a broken one. She wrote a small, even hand. It was the one thing about her that anybody had ever praised aloud, and it had been praised once by the curate when she was 14, and she had remembered it ever since, which told her something about herself that she preferred not to examine. She was 24. She was neither tall nor short. Her hair was the color of a wet stone wall, and it would not hold a curl no matter what was done to it. And her face was the sort of face that people looked past on their way to looking at something else. She had known this since she was 9 years old, and she had stopped minding it, mostly, the way a person stops minding a draft in a room they cannot leave. Her sister was beautiful. That was simply a fact about the world, like the direction of the river or the price of wheat. Seraphine Caro had been beautiful at 6 and remarkable at 12, and by 17 she had been the reason men rode out of their way to pass the lane. Thomasin had never resented it. She had only learned, early, that in a house with one beautiful daughter, the other daughter becomes useful, and that being useful was at least a thing a person could be good at. She totted the last column. She blotted it. She set the pen down. The house was very quiet. It had been quiet for 11 days. Her mother came in with a candle, although there was still light, because Hesper Caro had lost the habit of noticing what hour it was. She set the candle down on the table and stood there with her hands folded in front of her apron. "He wants you," she said. "I know. He has been at that letter since dinner." "I know that, too." Her mother did not move. She was a small woman who had been pretty once, and who wore it now, like a coat that no longer fitted. "Thomasin," she said, "when you go there." "Yes." "Do not let them see you be ashamed." Thomasin looked up at her then, and something passed between them that neither of them was going to say out loud, and then her mother took the candle back and went out. Her father was in the front room with the letter in his hands. Osric Caro had been a gentleman of small property for the whole of his life, and he had spent that life in the belief that a slightly larger property was owed to him and would arrive presently. He looked up when she came in. He did not ask her to sit. "It is finished," he said. "You will go on Tuesday." She had written the fair copy of that letter herself, 3 days ago from his dictation, sitting at that same table with her fingers cramping. She had made one objection while she wrote it, and he had told her to keep writing. "May I see it?" "You have seen it." "I have seen what you gave me on Saturday. You have been at it since. It wanted strengthening." He folded it. He pressed the wax. He held the seal down longer than the wax needed, which was a thing he did when he was pleased with himself. "You will read it aloud, in front of whoever he chooses to have in the room. That is the whole point of the exercise, Thomasin. A letter sent is a letter that may be burned unread. A letter read aloud in a man's own hall by a man's own daughter cannot be undone afterward." "By his daughter," she said. "Not by mine. Do not be clever. It does not suit you." He held the letter out. She took it. It was heavier than paper had any right to be. "Tuesday," he said. "Wear the gray." Alderforth Hall stood 7 miles off along the chalk road, and Thomasin walked it, because the gig had been sold in March, and nobody in the house had said so aloud since. She left at 8. The chalk was white and loose, and had worked its way into her shoes within the 1st mile, and by the 3rd mile she had stopped trying to keep it off her hem. Her gloves were her mother's, mended at both thumbs in thread that did not quite match. She had considered leaving them off entirely, and had decided that mended gloves were better than bare hands, and then had spent 2 miles wondering whether that was true. The hall came into view at the top of the rise. It was pale stone and long, and it did not look like a house so much as a decision that had been made a great while ago and never revisited. There were 9 windows across the front. She counted them because counting was steadying, and because she needed steadying and would not have admitted it to anybody. She was made to wait 50 minutes in a stone passage with a bench in it. She sat on the bench. She did not fidget with the letter. She held it flat on her knees with both hands, and she looked at the wall opposite, which was hung with a length of dark cloth, and under the cloth was the shape of a picture frame. And she wondered why a portrait in a passage should be covered when nobody in the house was dead. At last a man came for her. He was gray and narrow, and he moved the way a clerk moves. "Miss Caro, I am Peveril. His Grace will see you in the Great Hall. Am I to be shown in or announced?" The man looked at her properly for the first time. "You are to be shown in," he said, and there was something in the way he said it that she understood at once, and it was not unkindness. It was the opposite. It was a warning, given by a servant to a stranger, in the only currency a servant has. The Great Hall was very cold, and there were more people in it than she had expected. There was a woman of perhaps 60, seated near the fire in dark blue, upright, with her hands closed on the arms of the chair, and she looked at Thomasin the way a person looks at a bill they did not expect. There were 2 men standing by the far window. There were 3 servants against the wall who had no business being there and who had found business to be there anyway. And there was the Duke. He stood in the middle of the room, and he did not come forward. He was younger than she had imagined, and much stiller. He was tall and dark, and he held himself as though stillness cost him nothing, and his face gave away exactly as much as the covered picture in the passage had. She had expected anger. She had prepared herself for anger the whole 7 miles. There was no anger in the room at all, and that was very much worse. "Miss Caro," he said, "Your Grace, you have brought something." "I have." "Then let us have it." She did not move for a moment. She was aware of the servants against the wall. She was aware of the woman by the fire. She was aware, chiefly and stupidly, of the chalk on her hem. Nobody offered her a chair. She understood then that nobody was going to. She broke the seal. She unfolded the paper. She began to read. The first part was what she had written on Saturday, and she got through it steadily. It expressed the deep and lasting regret of the Caro family. It acknowledged that an engagement freely entered into had been broken in a manner that had caused public embarrassment to the House of Alderforth. It made no excuse. It asked pardon. Then the hand changed, not the writing, which was still hers. The words. The words said that the family disclaimed Seraphine Caro entirely. The words said that she had shown herself to be a creature without principle or gratitude, that she had been raised with every advantage and had repaid it with ruin, that her father had put her out of his house and out of his affection, and that his Grace was at liberty to speak of her in whatever terms he found just, and that no member of her family would contradict him. Thomasin stopped reading. The silence went on longer than she had thought a silence could. "Go on," said the woman by the fire. Thomasin folded the letter along the crease. "No," she said. She heard one of the servants shift his feet against the wall. "I beg your pardon," said the woman by the fire. "I will not read the rest of it." Her voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. "I would rather explain why, if I am permitted, and if I am not permitted, then I will go, and you may burn it." The Duke had not moved at all. "Explain," he said. "The first half of that letter is true, and I wrote it, and I stand behind every word." She held it out slightly, as though it were something she had found. "The second half is my father, buying his own comfort with my sister's name. He has never put her out of his house. He put her on the Norwich Mail on a Thursday morning, and he has not spoken her name since. And those are different things. And the difference matters. Does it? It matters to me. She lowered the letter. Your Grace, I came here to apologize, and I mean to do it properly. So I will do it in my own words, and then you may judge whether it was worth the walk. Nobody stopped her. She had not expected to get so far. Your brother was injured, she said. Not in his fortune, in front of people. He stood in a church with 200 and some souls behind him, and he was made to turn round and walk back down the aisle alone. And every one of those people watched him do it. And he will meet a good number of them again at every dinner he attends for the next 10 years. That is the harm. Not the settlement, not the notices, not the talk in London. The walk back down the aisle. That is what I am sorry for, and I am sorry for it particularly, and I have thought about it every night for 11 nights. The woman by the fire made a small sound. Thomason did not look at her. I cannot bring you my sister's remorse, she said. I do not have it. I do not know whether it exists. I can only bring you mine, and mine is worth a great deal less, because I am not the one who did it. But it is honest, and it is all that walked up your drive this morning. She stopped. The fire moved. Somewhere far off in the house a door was closed. Is that the whole of it? Said the Duke. It is the whole of what I have. Then thank you, Miss Caro. Nothing in his face had altered by the width of a hair. Peveril will see you out. She left the letter on the long table by the door, because she could not think what else to do with it, and she walked 7 miles home in a wind that had turned round to the north while she was inside. It was dark before she reached the lane. She could see the light in the front room from a quarter mile off, and she knew from the shape of it that he had not gone to bed. Her father was waiting in the hall. Well, he said, it is done. You read it. She took her mother's gloves off, finger by finger, and set them on the shelf by the door. I read most of it. She told him plainly, and she did not soften any part of it. And she watched his face go from expectation to confusion, to something white and small and furious. And she stood there and let it happen, because there was nothing else to be done with the thing once it was done. Where is the letter? He said. I left it on his table. You left it. He may burn it or keep it. It is his. He raised his hand. He did not bring it down. He had never once brought it down in 24 years. And she thought, in the strange, floating way a person thinks in such a moment, that this was the closest he had ever come, and that it was over a piece of paper. Her mother came out of the kitchen and stood in the doorway with a cloth in her hands. Osric, she said. He went past both of them and out into the yard. Thomason sat down on the bottom stair. She was suddenly aware that she had walked 14 miles and eaten nothing since a piece of bread at 7 in the morning, and that her feet were bleeding in 2 places, and that none of this had occurred to her while it was happening. Come and eat, her mother said. In a moment. Now please. She ate. She went up. She lay in the dark and listened to the wind take the loose slate on the byre roof, back and forth, and she thought about the covered picture in the stone passage, and about the way Peveril had said you are to be shown in, and about a man so still that the stillness itself was the message. She slept badly and woke early and did the accounts again, although they had been finished on Monday. The rider came the next evening at dusk. He was a boy on a good horse, and he did not dismount. He handed down a packet and said it was for Miss Caro, and when Thomason said that there were 2 Miss Caros in the parish, he said no, that he had been told there was one, and then he turned the horse and went. She took it inside. Her mother followed her. It was her letter, her own fair copy, her own hand, the broken seal, the crease down the middle where she had folded it in the great hall. "He has sent it back," her mother said. "So he has." Thomason. Her mother had taken it out of her hands, and she was turning it over near the candle, and she had gone very still. "Look at the folds." "What of them?" "There are 4. Her mother laid it flat and ran her thumb down the paper. "You folded it once, in front of him, at the 4th paragraph. It has been folded and opened 3 times since. Look at the paper along the edge. That has not been folded once, by a man handing a thing back to a servant. That has been read and put away and taken out again and read." Thomason looked at the paper. Then she saw that there was a second sheet behind the first. It was smaller. It was heavy, and it was unsealed, and it carried no crest at all. The hand was black and upright, and it had been written quickly, and there was only 1 line of it. You stopped at the 4th paragraph. "Come on Thursday and read me the rest of what you would have said." There was a thing that nobody in the house knew, and Thomason had carried it for 11 days, and she would have to carry it for the rest of her life. She had been the one who sent Seraphine away. It had happened on the Wednesday night, which was the night before the wedding, and it had taken about a quarter of an hour, and it had cost her everything she had. Seraphine had come into her room without a candle. That was the first strange thing, because Seraphine did nothing without a candle, and did nothing at all if there wasn't somebody to see her do it. She had sat down on the end of the bed in the dark, and she had not spoken at all. Then she had said, "I cannot. You are frightened. Everybody is frightened the night before. I'm not frightened. I'm telling you a fact." Her voice was perfectly level, and that was the second strange thing. "I have told Papa 4 times. I told him in October, and I told him at Christmas, and I told him a fortnight ago, and I told him this afternoon in the orchard. And every time he has said the same words back to me, which are that I do not know my own mind. Thomason, I know my own mind. I have known it since the first week. I do not love him, and I never will. And if I stand up in that church tomorrow, I will be lying in front of God and 200 people. And then I will go and live in that house and be a liar in it every day until I die. Merrick Vandeleur is a decent man." "Yes." Seraphine had laughed once, and it had been an awful sound. "Yes, he is. That is the worst part of it, is it not? If he were a brute, I could stay and be admired for bearing it." Thomason had sat up in the bed. The room was very cold. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing. I only wanted somebody in this house to hear me say it once before I did it." And Thomason had got out of bed and gone down to the back parlor in her shift, with her feet bare on the boards, and she had opened the ledger, and she had taken out of the back of it the money she had been putting by for 6 years. It was not a great deal. It was what a woman gets when she sells eggs on her own account, and mends for the curate's wife and copies letters for a solicitor in Wintersill at a penny the page, and puts every coin of it away for a life that she has never once described out loud to anybody. She had been saving it since she was 18. She had never named what it was for. She had only known that it was hers, and that it was the single thing in the world that was. She had put it into her sister's hands and closed her sister's fingers over it. "The Norwich mail goes from the Bell at 5:30, she had said. "Do not take the trunk. Take the small case and leave it in the hedge tonight, so you are not carrying it down the lane in the morning. Write to Mama in a month. Not before. A month, Seraphine. She will not survive it if you write before she has had time to be angry." Seraphine had stared at her. "Why?" she had said. And Thomason had given her the true answer, because it was the middle of the night, and there was nobody else in the world awake. Because I have spent my whole life in the second chair, she said, and I have watched what it does to a woman to be given no choice and told afterward that she chose it. You have one door, and it is open until 5:30. I am not going to be the one who shuts it. That was the whole of it. That was the principled thing, done in the dark, in a shift, with cold feet, for no reward. It had cost her the 6 years. It had cost her father a match that would have carried the mortgage, and her mother the last of her health, and Merrick Vandeleur the walk back down the aisle in front of every soul in the county. And she had been sent to apologize for it. And she had gone. And she had stood in a cold hall and said she was sorry. And she had meant every word of that, too. Both things were true. She had learned in 11 days that a person can be entirely right and entirely the cause of the damage, and that there is no arrangement of words that lets you say so. She did not go on Thursday. She had meant to. She had got as far as taking down the gray and brushing the chalk out of the hem, and then her father had come to the door of her room and told her what she was to say when she got there, and she had stood with the brush in her hand and listened to him lay it out. She was to be pleasant. She was to let his grace understand that the family had been overwrought, and that Tuesday's business had been the strain of it. She was to observe that the mortgage on the Fenhollow land fell due at Michaelmas. She was not to observe it directly. She was to bring the conversation somewhere near it, and then be silent, and let a duke be a duke. No, she said, you will not begin that again. I'm not beginning anything. He asked me to come and say what I would have said. If I go up there with your errand in my mouth, then I have not come to say what I would have said. I have come to say what you would have said, and he will know it in a minute and a half, and he will be right to. She wrote him one line that evening and sent it by the pig boy for a penny. Your Grace, I find I cannot come on Thursday for a reason. I would rather not put in a letter. I do not expect you to write again. Thomason Carew. He came on Saturday. She was in the yard with her sleeves up and both arms in a barrel of rainwater, wringing out a bolster case, when she heard the horse on the lane. She thought it was the farrier. She had actually said the word "wait" aloud before she looked up, and by then he was through the gate and off the horse, and she was standing in her own yard, with her forearms wet to the elbow and her hair coming down, and no possible thing to do about any of it. Miss Carew, Your Grace, I have called at an inconvenient hour. You have called at the only hour there is. She wiped her hands down her apron. She did not apologize for the apron. Will you come in? The parlor is cold. I will not pretend otherwise, and then watch you sit in it and be gracious about it. Then let us have the cold parlor. Her mother went white in the passage, and then went extremely fast in 3 directions at once, and Thomason caught her arm on the way past and said quietly, No tea, Mama. There is no cake in the house, and we are not going to send out for one. And her mother looked at her, and something in her face gave way and she nodded. The parlor was cold. The fire was laid but not lit, because it was Saturday, and the fire was not lit on a Saturday until 4. Thomason knelt down and lit it herself in front of him, because there was nobody else to do it, and because pretending there was would have been worse. He watched her do it. He did not offer to help, and she was glad of that, because if he had, she would have had to refuse, and refusing would have made a thing of it. He took the chair with the sound leg. She took the other one. Your note, he said, was 30 words. There was not more to say. There was a reason you would rather not put in a letter. That is more to say. That is a great deal more to say. It is only not written down. She looked at the fire. You are quick, Your Grace. I am not quick. I have been sitting in a room by myself for 4 days, with nothing to be but quick. He set his hat on his knee. I will tell you why I have come, and then you may put me out. I came to make you an offer, and I have spent the ride deciding not to make it. What was it? Money. He said it without any decoration at all. 300 a year on your mother, settled so that your father cannot reach it. The Michaelmas mortgage cleared. In return, nothing, whatever. Not a statement. Not a retraction. Not your father's signature on anything. I had it drawn up on Wednesday, and it is in my coat now. Then why have you decided not to make it? Because I watched you light your own fire, he said. And I understood, about 11 seconds too late, what it would do to you to be handed that in this room. The fire took hold of the kindling and went up with a small rush. You are right, she said. I would have refused it. I know. I would have refused it badly. I would have said something I could not take back. She folded her hands. So let me refuse it well instead, while it is still in your coat, and neither of us has to look at it. No, Your Grace, not the 300, not the mortgage, not any part of it. My father has spent a fortnight trying to turn my sister into money, and I will not finish the job for him on a Saturday afternoon in a cold room. Then your family will lose the land. Very probably. And you consider that a fair exchange. I consider it none of your affair, which is a different thing, and a colder one, and I am sorry for it. She lifted her chin. But there is something I do want, and since you have come all this way, I am going to ask for it, and it is not money, and it will cost you nothing, which I imagine will be a novelty. He said, Ask. When you speak of my sister, and you will speak of her, and so will your aunt and your steward, and every soul in your house down to the boot boy. She stopped and made herself slow down. Speak of what she did. Do not speak of what she is. Those are two different sentences, and the second one follows a woman into every room she enters for the rest of her life, and the first one does not. That is what I want. That is all of it. The Duke of Alderforth looked at her for a length of time that became uncomfortable, and then went past, uncomfortable, into something else. Very well, he said. You agree to it. I have already agreed to it. I gave that instruction in my own house on Wednesday morning, before I knew you would ask. He turned the hat a half-turn on his knee. Which brings me to the reason I did not simply write. Yes. Miss Caro, who paid for the Norwich mail. The fire cracked. She did not move at all. Your sister left on foot at 5 in the morning with a case she could carry, he said. And she has since been a fortnight in a lodging in Norwich that costs 11 shillings a week. And she has not written to your father for a farthing. And I know that because I had it looked into within 4 days, as any man in my position would. Somebody put money into her hand. It was not your father. It was not your mother, who has not held a shilling of her own since 1809. He watched her. So I have been sitting in a room by myself for 4 days being quick. Thomason looked at the fire and said nothing. I shall not make you answer, he said after a while. I want you to understand that I know I could. Your father would answer it in about 4 seconds if I asked him in the right tone of voice. He does not know the answer. No, said the Duke. He does not. He stood. She stood. He put his hat on at the door and turned back with his hand on the frame. My brother has not left the West Wing since the 12th of May, he said. I do not say that to move you. I say it because you are the only person who has come into my house and told me a true thing since the 12th of May, and I have not decided yet whether that makes you dangerous. Good day, Miss Caro. Good day, Your Grace. She stood in the middle of the cold parlor and listened to the horse go down the lane and out onto the chalk road, and she went on, standing there after she could not hear it any more. And then her legs went out from under her, and she sat down hard on the floor beside the fire she had lit, and she put both hands over her mouth, and she stayed like that for a long time without making any sound at all. 7 weeks went by, and nothing came from Alderforth at all. Then, in the 2nd week of July, the note came from Peveril. It was not from the Duke. It was 4 lines in a clerk's hand on paper that had been used before and scraped, and it asked whether Miss Caro could make herself available on Tuesday morning, and it did not say for what, and it ended with the words, "I have not troubled his grace with this." She went. Alderforth Hall in the morning was a different building. On the Tuesday of the letter, she had come up the drive and seen a decision made a great while ago. Now she came up it and saw that the decision was expensive to maintain. There were men on the roof of the East Range. There was a bucket chain of housemaids on the back stair. Somewhere out of sight, somebody was beating a carpet with a rhythm like slow artillery. Peveril met her at a side door, and not the front one, and she understood why, and did not mind. "Miss Caro, thank you." "You had better tell me what it is before I go any further, Mr. Peveril, because I have already been in one room in this house that I was not warned about." The gray man permitted himself something that was nearly a smile. "Lord Merrick has not come out of the West Wing since the 12th of May. He has his meals carried in. His Grace has tried. Her Ladyship has tried. The doctor has been twice, and has been sent away twice." He paused. "I have been in this house 41 years, and I have run out of ideas. And you are the one caller at this house in 4 months who did not appear to want anything, and I am past the point of being proud about it." They went up. The passage on the way was the same stone passage with the bench in it, and the covered picture was still on the wall, and Thomason stopped in front of it. "What is under the cloth?" "That is not mine to say. Mr. Peveril." The steward looked at the floor, and then at the cloth. "It was commissioned in January," he said, "for the wedding. It was hung in April. It is very good. Nobody in this house can decide whether taking it down would be a kindness or an insult, and so it has been under a piece of stuff for 9 weeks, and every servant here walks past it twice a day and pretends there is nothing on that wall. You could ask him." "Nobody asks him anything, miss. That is rather the difficulty." Lord Merrick Vandeleur was 21, and he was sitting in a chair by an unlit grate in a room with the shutters half closed, and he had a book in his lap that he wasn't reading, and when the door opened, he did not look up. "I have said I do not want it." "I have not brought you anything," said Thomason. He looked up then. He had his brother's coloring, and none of his brother's stillness. He had the sort of open face that cannot help itself, and it had had 9 weeks of nothing done to it, and it showed. "You," he said. "Yes." "You are the one who came and would not read the letter." "I am." "The whole house has talked of nothing else for a week." He set the book aside. There was a great deal of feeling moving across his face, and no practice at all in stopping it. "You are Seraphine's sister." "I am." "Have you come to tell me she is sorry?" "No," said Thomason. "She isn't sorry, and I will not stand in your brother's house and tell you she is." Nobody had spoken to him like that in 9 weeks. She watched it land. She watched something in him come up off the floor for the first time in 2 months, and it was not comfort, and it was not kindness, and it was the only thing in the world that was going to be any use to him. "Then why are you here?" he said. "Because Mr. Peveril has run out of ideas, and I am the last one on his list." She looked around the room. It was a good room being wasted. "And because I am going to ask you to do something extremely dull, and you are going to say no, and then you are going to do it." "What?" "There are 200 and some letters downstairs that have to be answered. Condolences. Everybody in the county has written to your brother about you, as though you had died. because that is what people do when they do not know what else to do, and none of them have been answered. And every day they are not answered is another day the county has to invent a reason why. She pulled the shutter open. He flinched at the light and did not complain about it. I have a fair hand, and no name worth signing. You have a name, and, I would guess, no stomach for a pen at present. I will write them. You will tell me what to say. It will take 4 days, and it will be the most tedious 4 days of your life. And at the end of it, there will not be a single unanswered letter in this house. Merrick Vandeleur stared at her. That is the worst offer anybody has ever made me, he said. Yes. Why would I? Because you have been sitting in this chair for 9 weeks being the man it happened to, said Thomason. And I am offering you 4 days of being the man who answered his correspondence. It is not much. I am aware it is not much. But you cannot get from where you are to where you want to be in 1 step, my lord. And this is the smallest step I could find. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, There is no ink in this room. I brought some. He laughed. It came out cracked and surprised him more than it surprised her. They started that morning at the small table by the window, and she wrote and he dictated badly, and then better. And by the 4th letter, he was standing up to think. And by the 9th, he had opened the other shutter himself, and at some point in the 2nd hour, she became aware that the door behind her was not quite closed. She did not turn round. She heard nothing. There was nothing to hear. But she knew, in the way a person knows, that there was somebody standing in the passage outside a door he had not opened, listening to his brother's voice for the first time since the 12th of May, and not coming in. She kept writing. She did not tell Merrick. She never told him. The Duke of Alderforth had stood outside that door for 1 hour and 11 minutes. He had come up to tell Peveril that the woman was not to be sent for again without his knowledge, and he had got as far as the turn of the passage and heard his brother laughing, and he had stopped there with one hand on the wall, like a man who has been struck somewhere that does not show. He had not heard that sound since the 12th of May. He had tried everything a man with 30,000 a year can try. He had brought physicians from London, and a friend from the regiment, and a spaniel puppy that had been sent back down the stairs within the hour. He had sat in that room himself for whole evenings, saying the right things in the right order, and none of it had moved the thing an inch. And now, a farmer's daughter with chalk on her hem had walked in with a bottle of ink and made his brother laugh inside 40 minutes. He had gone away down the passage before either of them heard him, and he had gone into his book room and shut the door and stood in the middle of it. And what he felt was not gratitude, or not only gratitude. It was the particular shame of a man who is discovering, at 31, that he has been managing people all his life and has never once simply told one of them the truth. On the 4th day, the letters were finished. There were 216 of them, and they went out in 3 canvas bags, and Merrick signed the last one, and then sat looking at his own hand, as though it belonged to somebody he used to know. Thomason capped the ink and cleaned the nibs and put her cloak on, and when she came down to the side door, Peveril was not there, and the Duke was. "Miss Caro, will you give me a quarter of an hour?" He took her not to the great hall, but to a small square room at the back of the house, with a plain table in it, and 2 chairs and a window, looking at the kitchen garden. There was no fire. There was nothing in the room at all that a person could be impressed by, and she understood that this had been chosen, and that the choosing had taken thought. He did not sit down. He stood with his back to the window. "I am going to tell you something," he said, "and I shall not arrange it first, because I have discovered lately that I arrange everything, and I would like to see what happens if I do not. Very well. Your sister came to me in October. Thomason's hands went still on the back of the chair. She was staying here for the shooting. She asked me for a quarter of an hour in this room, and I gave it to her. And she told me that she did not love my brother and did not believe she ever would. And she asked me what she should do. He was looking at a point on the table. She was 18 years old. She had ridden the whole way from the top of the house to this room to say it to a man she was frightened of. And she said it well. And she said it once, and she did not cry. What did you tell her? I told her that she did not know her own mind. The room was very quiet. I said it kindly, he said. That is the part I cannot get past. I said it in the kindest possible voice, the way you speak to a child about a dog that has died. And I gave her a glass of wine, and I walked her back to the stairs, and I went out shooting, and I did not think about it again until the 12th of May, when I watched my brother walk back down that aisle. Those were my father's words, said Thomason. Exactly those. He used them 4 times. Yes, I have thought about that a good deal since Saturday. He looked up. It appears that when 2 men on opposite ends of a county want the same wedding, they reach for the same sentence. I have not been able to decide whether that is a comfort or the worst thing I have ever learned about myself. She sat down. Her legs had made the decision without her. Why are you telling me this? Because you stood in my hall and would not read a lie, he said. And I have let you go on believing for a fortnight that I was the injured party in this business. And I find I cannot go on holding a thing over you that I have no right to hold. That is all. I am not asking you for anything. I want that understood before you say a word. There is nothing at the end of this. Thomason looked at her own hands on the table. They were red from the ink in the cold water. May I tell you something in return, she said. It is not the same size. Tell me anything you like. You asked me on Saturday why I would let the land go rather than take your money, and I gave you a cold answer, and it was not the true one. She turned her hand over. My mother was a second daughter. Her father owed money to a man who wanted a wife, and it was arranged in a fortnight, and she was 19. She has told me twice in my life that she was happy about it, and both times she told me at a wedding, and both times she was looking at the wall behind me while she said it. Miss Caro, I have watched her go quiet for 24 years. Not unhappy. Quiet. There is a difference, and it is worse. She looked up. She used to sing in the kitchen. I remember it. I was perhaps 6. She has not sung in that house since I was 6 years old, and nobody ever did anything cruel to her, and there is no crime anywhere in it, and she stopped singing all the same. The Duke did not speak. So when a man puts money on the table in a cold room, and it is to do with a marriage, she said, any marriage, anybody's, I hear a door close. That is all it is. It is not principle. It is a noise I have been hearing since I was 6. He was quiet for a long time. Thank you, he said. You are welcome. I said there was nothing at the end of this, and I meant it. He came round the table and stopped at a proper distance and put both hands on the back of the other chair. But I am going to ask you for one thing, and it is the smallest thing I have, and you may refuse it without giving a reason, and I will not raise it again. Ask. There is a picture in the stone passage with a cloth over it. It has been there 9 weeks. I cannot take it down. My brother cannot. My aunt has decided that the correct course is to leave it, which is her way of deciding nothing. His jaw moved. Come on Friday, and take the cloth off it. That is the whole of the request. Come on Friday, take it off, and go home. There is nobody else in this county with no reason whatever to be careful. And if I do not come, then I shall not ask again, he said, and the cloth will stay up. And in some years, a housemaid will take it down when nobody is looking, and that will be that. She came on Friday. She took the cloth off with both hands and folded it over her arm, and then she stood in the cold passage and looked at her sister. It was very good. That was the awful part of it. Seraphine at 18, in the blue, half-turned, caught in the instant before a smile rather than in the smile itself, and whoever had painted her had seen the thing the county never saw, which was that she was not vain, only extremely visible, and that these are not the same, and one of them is a burden. Thomasin stood there for a long while with the cloth on her arm. Then she carried the cloth down to the kitchen because it seemed wrong to leave it lying, and she gave it to a housemaid, and she walked home. She came back the next Friday. Nobody had asked her to. She had told herself on the Wednesday that she was going for Merrick, and by the Thursday, she had stopped bothering with that. It became a Friday. She never stayed above 2 hours. She sat in the small square room with the plain table, and he asked her opinion on things that a duke has no business asking a farmer's daughter about, and she gave it, and he took some of it and argued with the rest. They did the almshouse roll in September, which took 4 Fridays, and she got 2 names put back on it that his agent had struck off for reasons that did not survive her reading them aloud. They quarreled for the better part of an hour on the last Friday in September about an apple tree. It stood at the corner of the kitchen garden, and it had not borne properly in 6 years, and his gardener wanted it down. Thomasin said it wanted a hard pruning and 3 years. He said that 6 years of nothing was an answer. She said that 6 years of nothing was a question, and that the man had been pruning it as though it were a pear, and that she had seen him do it. They went out into the wet grass and stood under it and argued, and a footman had to come and find them because the horses had been standing 40 minutes. The tree stayed. It bore in the 3rd year. She did not know that until much later. She never once mentioned money, and neither did he, and that subject sat outside the room every Friday like a dog that had been told to wait. She knew what was happening to her by the 1st week of October. She named it privately, in her own bed, in the dark, in a single sentence, and then she put it where the money in the ledger had been, and she did not take it out again, because a thing that cannot be had is easier to carry folded. And in the 2nd week of October, Seraphine came home. She was thinner. That was the first thing, and it was the only thing for the first half-minute, because Seraphine Caro had never in her life been thin. She had been the other thing, the warm, abundant thing that people turned round in the road to look at. And now her wrists came out of her sleeves like the handles of tools. She was sitting in the back parlor when Thomasin came in from the yard. Her mother was standing by the door with both hands over her mouth. Her father was not in the house and had not been told. "Hello, Tom," said Seraphine. They walked out to the byre wall together because there was nowhere in that house to say anything. She had been copying music. That was the work she had found, 11 shillings a week for the lodging and what was left over for coal, and she had been good at it. And then in August, the man who employed her had made her an offer of a kind she would not consider, and she had refused it plainly, and that had been the end of the work. She told it in a flat voice with no arrangement at all. She had eaten 1 meal a day since the middle of August. "You did not write for money." "No." "Seraphine, you gave me 6 years, Tom." Her sister looked out over the wet field. "I was not going to come back and ask you for 6 more. They stood there." "I am going to marry him," said Seraphine. Thomasin turned her head. "Merrick, if he will have me. I have thought about nothing else for 2 months, and I am quite clear." Her voice did not shake at all. "I know what you are going to say. You are going to say that I did not love him in May, and I do not love him in October, and nothing has changed. Nothing has. But I have found out what happens to a woman with nothing, and it is not what I thought. And it is not being cold or being hungry. It is that after a while, there is no version of you left that anybody would want to be kind to. I would rather be a liar in a good house than that. I have made the arithmetic, and that is the answer. You are 20. I am 19, and I have been 19 since August. She smiled with no warmth in it at all. You gave me the money so that I could choose. I have chosen. I am sorry it is not the choice you would have liked, but it is mine, and you may not take it back. Thomason put both hands flat on the top of the wall. He is better, she said. He is nearly himself. It has taken 4 months, and it has been done by inches, and he answered 216 letters with his own name at the bottom of every one of them. And if you walk into that house in a good bonnet, he will say yes inside a minute, and he will spend 40 years finding out. Yes, said Seraphine, I expect he will. Then do not. Give me a reason that is not about him. And Thomason could not, because the only reason she had was on Fridays, in a small square room with a plain table. And it was a thing she had folded up and put away, and had no right to take out and set on a wall between herself and her sister. Seraphine watched her not say it. Ah, she said, do not. I have not said anything. You are about to. No. Seraphine's face changed then, and for one moment she looked exactly as she had at 17, in the blue, caught before the smile. No, Tom, I am not. But I will tell you what I do know, since we are being honest at a wall. I know who paid for the Norwich mail. I have known it every day for 5 months. And that is the only thing I own outright in the world, and I am not going to spend it, and I would rather you did not look at me like a woman who thinks I might. She went up to the house. The note from Lady Adeline came on the Tuesday, and it was not a request in any sense that mattered. Thomason went. She wore the gray. She had learned by now that there was no point in wearing anything else, and that the pretense of trying was worth less than the plain fact of not. The small blue room at Alderforth had a fire in it that was much too large for the size of the room, which Thomason understood within about 4 minutes to be deliberate, and she declined to move her chair. Lady Adeline Vandeleur was 64 and had buried a husband and 2 sons, and she sat with her hands closed on the arms of the chair exactly as she had sat in the great hall in May. You will take tea. Thank you. No. Sit down, Miss Caro. I am sitting. So you are. The old woman regarded her. I shall not waste your afternoon. I have never in my life told a young woman that she is too low to marry my nephew, and I do not propose to start, chiefly because it is a stupid argument, and it has never once worked. Your grandfather was in trade, and my great-grandmother was a Dutchwoman with a fish business, and we are all of us 4 generations from something we do not mention. That is not my objection. Then what is? You paid for the Norwich mail. The fire was very loud. I have known since the middle of June, said Lady Adeline. It took me 9 days. Your father does not know. Your mother does not know. My nephew does not know, and I have not told him, and I shall not, because it is not mine to tell, and because I should like you to understand from the beginning that I am not threatening you. I am doing something a good deal less comfortable. I am telling you the truth. Thomason sat very still. Here is the truth. You are going to marry him. Do not trouble to deny it. I am not asking you. I am telling you what I have watched happen in my own house since June, and I have some experience of watching. She leaned forward slightly. And on the day you do, you will begin a marriage with a fact in it that he does not have. Not a small fact. Not a debt, or a cousin, or a girlish letter. The fact that you funded the ruin of his brother and stood in his hall and apologized for it, and let him confess to you and did not confess back. I did not fund a ruin. I bought my sister a door. I am aware. I dare say God is aware." The old woman's voice did not rise. "The question is what it will look like in 11 years, when a housemaid who has left our service without a character sells it to a newspaper for £5. Because that is what happens, Miss Caro. Not treachery. Not villains. A servant with a grievance and a rent to pay. It happens somewhere in this county about twice a year, and I have seen 2 families broken by it, and neither of them had done anything worse than you have." "Then I will tell him." "Yes, that is the other road, and I want you to look down it properly before you take it, because you are a clever girl, and clever girls always assume the confession will go well." Lady Ottoline sat back. "He is a proud man who has just discovered that he was wrong about the single most important thing he ever decided. He is raw. He will hear that the woman he has been asking about apple trees on Fridays is the person who put the money in the girl's hand, and he will hear it after 4 months of not asking you a question he already knew the answer to, and I cannot tell you what he will do, and neither can you, and neither can he." "You have a third road," said Thomason. "You would not have summoned me for 2. I have. Your sister goes abroad. There is a family in Lausanne who want an English companion, and I can arrange it inside a fortnight, and she will be well treated and well paid, and a great way off. She goes, and the one person who could ever corroborate it is out of reach, and you say nothing, and you have a good life. I will pay for it myself, and no account of it will ever appear anywhere. I am offering you the thing you want. For what? For nothing. I am 64, and I have watched this house lose 2 boys and half its heart, and I would like to see somebody in it be happy before I go. And I have decided, on evidence, that it had better be you." She spread one hand. "That is my whole reason. You may find it insufficient. Most people do." Thomason looked into the enormous fire. She thought about the byre wall, and her sister's wrists coming out of her sleeves, and the sentence, "I am not going to spend it." "May I ask you a question?" she said. "You may. In October last year, when Seraphine came to this house and told your nephew that she did not love his brother." Thomason turned her head. "Who told him what to say to her?" Lady Ottoline Vandeleur did not move, but her hand, on the arm of the chair, closed. "That is a very unpleasant question," she said. "Yes. You will not get an answer to it. I have one." Thomason stood. "You gave him a sentence, and he used it kindly, and it cost your family a wedding, and your nephew 9 weeks in a dark room, and you have never told a soul, and you have carried it since May in exactly the way you are telling me I cannot carry mine." She picked up her gloves. "So we are the same, ma'am, in that one particular, and it is the only particular in which we will ever be the same. And I will not be the second woman in this house who fixes a thing by sending a girl a long way off. Sit down, Miss Caro." "No, thank you. Good day, ma'am." She got as far as the passage before her hands began to shake, and she got as far as the chalk road before she had to stop and stand still for a minute, with her fist against her mouth. And she did not cry, and she walked the 7 miles home. She told Merrick on the Thursday, because he was the one it had been done to, and because there is an order to these things, and he came first. They were in the west wing, with the shutters open, and the fire lit, and 216 letters answered and gone. And she told him standing up, plainly, in about 90 words, and she softened no part of it, and offered no explanation afterward. He sat with his hands on his knees, and didn't speak. "The night before," he said at last. "Yes. You knew at midnight, and I found out at 11 in the morning. Yes. Did she ask you for it?" "No." "Would she have gone if you had not given it to her?" "I do not know," said Thomason. I have asked myself that every night since, and I don't know. And I will not pretend I do in order to make this easier for either of us. Merrick Vandeleur looked at the fire. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Please go now. I am not angry. I would simply rather you were not in the room while I do this." She went home. She stayed at home on the Friday. She stayed at home on the Friday after that, too. No one sent. There was no letter, and no rider, and no note in a clerk's hand on scraped paper. She had expected something. That was the part she was ashamed of afterward. She had expected, at the very least, a line telling her not to come again, and she had prepared 4 separate answers to it over the first week. And by the second week, she had understood that a man who has been handed a thing like that does not write a line. He goes quiet, and the quiet is the answer, and there is nothing in it to reply to. The weather turned in the first week of November. The chalk road went to gray mud and then froze hard in ruts that would turn a horse's ankle. She did the accounts. She mended. She took her mother to church on 2 Sundays and sat through both services without hearing a word of either. Her mother asked once, on the 2nd Sunday, whether there had been any news from the great house, and Thomasin said no, and her mother looked at her for a moment, and then began talking about the curate's chilblains, and Thomasin loved her very much for it. What she could not decide in all that time was whether she had done right. She had told Merrick because he was owed it. She was still certain of that at 3 in the afternoon, and much less certain of it at 3 in the morning, when the argument turned itself inside out and became the observation that she had unburdened herself onto a man who had spent the summer climbing out of a hole and had done it for the comfort of her own conscience, and had called that honesty. On the 17th day she walked it. She had no idea she was going to until she was 2 miles out. She had gone up the lane for eggs and had simply kept on in her old boots, without gloves, along 7 miles of frozen ruts in a wind out of the north. She came to the top of the rise at about 2:30. The hall lay below her in the flat white light, with its 9 windows across the front, and there was smoke from 4 chimneys, and men were still working on the roof of the East Range, and a cart was coming up the drive with the horses steaming. She stood at the top of the rise and counted the windows, because counting was steadying. Then she turned round and walked home, and that was the worst 7 miles of her life, and she did not once consider going down. He came on the 21st day, in the afternoon, on foot. She was in the yard again, which she thought afterward was the sort of joke life makes when it is not being kind, and she had a basket of frozen linen on her hip, and she saw him come through the gate with no horse and no hat and mud to the knee, and she put the basket down on the step. "You have walked." "I have walked 7 miles. I have been walking it in pieces for 3 weeks, said the Duke of Alderforth, and today I did it in 1. And I should like to say what I came to say standing in this yard, if you will let me, because I do not trust myself in a room with a fire in it." "Say it." "I have not asked you," he said. She waited. "In May, I told you that I would not make you answer the question about the Norwich mail, and I have not asked it. Not on any Friday. Not once in 5 months and 20 days. His breath was white. "My aunt told me on the 2nd of November that you had been to see her. She did not tell me what was said. My brother told me nothing at all, and has told me nothing since, and will not. And I have not asked him either. And I want you to understand that I have known the answer since about the middle of June, and I have gone on not asking it, because it was yours and not mine, and because I had already once in my life told a Carrow girl in that house what she thought, and I was not going to do it twice." Thomasin stood in the cold with her hands at her sides. "Then I will say it," she said. "You do not have to. I know. That is the only reason it is worth anything." She lifted her chin. I gave her the money. All of it. 6 years of it, out of the back of the ledger, on the Wednesday night. And I told her which coach, and what to do with the case, and when to write to my mother. Nobody asked me to. My father does not know. I did it on my own, and I would do it again. And 4 days later, I walked 7 miles to your house and apologized to you for it. And I meant that too. And I have not found a way to hold both of those in one hand, and I have stopped trying. The wind came across the yard. I thought I was defending my sister, she said. I have had 5 months to think about it, and that is not what I was doing. I was 24 years old, standing in a cold parlor with 6 years of egg money in my hand, and I gave it away to a girl who had a door open, because nobody ever opened one for my mother, and nobody was ever going to open one for me, and I would rather have spent it on somebody's freedom than on my own funeral. That is the truth of it. It was not noble. It was the only thing I have ever done for myself in my life, and I did it by giving it all away. And I have never said that sentence out loud before, and I do not intend to say it again. He stood quite still for a moment. Then he said, "My aunt is right about one thing and wrong about the other, and I have spent 3 weeks separating them. So I shall be exact. Be exact. She is right, that a marriage cannot hold a thing that one of the two of them does not know. She is entirely right about that. She is right that there will be talk, and right that somebody will sell it eventually, and right that it will be a bad month when they do." He took 1 step and stopped. "She is wrong that what you did was a thing to be hidden. It is not a stain, Miss Caro. It is the best act anybody performed in the whole of this business, and it was performed by the poorest person in it, and every other person concerned, myself at the head of them, had the power to do it for nothing, and did not." She could not speak. "I have one question," he said, "and I have earned the right to ask exactly one. Ask it. 17 days after you stopped coming, you walked out to the top of the rise and stood there and went away again." His voice was not quite steady for the first time since she had known him. "Peveril saw you from the roof of the East Range. He came down and told me, and I was out of the door and up the drive inside 3 minutes, and there was nobody on the road. I have thought about that every day since. Why did you not come down?" "Because you had not sent for me," said Thomason. "And I have been sent for my whole life, and I have never once in 24 years gone anywhere because I chose to." "Then choose now." "I am choosing now. I have walked out to the top of that rise once. I am not going to do it twice." She was shaking, and she let him see it. "Ask me, Your Grace. Not for the estate, and not for your brother, and not because I mended something in your house that you could not mend. If there is any other reason, then ask me. And if there is not, then say so plainly. And I will go in and shut the door, and neither of us will ever mention it again." "Thomason Caro," he said, "will you marry me?" "Say the reason." "Because I have spent 4 months asking your opinion about almshouses and apple trees, for the sole purpose of hearing you disagree with me," he said. "And because you are the only person alive who has ever told me a thing I did not want to hear, and then stayed in the room while I heard it. I do not want to be improved. I want to be argued with on Fridays for the next 40 years. "Yes," she said. He did not take hold of her. He put out one hand, palm up in the cold, and waited, and she put her hand into it, and he closed his fingers round it and looked down at it for a long moment, at the ink still under 2 of the nails, at the crack across the knuckle from the frozen linen, at the plain red hand of a woman who lit her own fires. "Come in out of the yard," he said. You are freezing. You have walked 7 miles. I'm aware. I shall want a chair. Lady Adeline came to Fenhollow before the banns were read, which nobody expected, and she came alone, which nobody expected either. She sat in the cold parlor with her back very straight, and she took the tea she was offered and drank it, which was more than she had done for Thomasin in her own house. I do not take back what I said in the blue room, she said. Every word of it stands, and you will find out in about 11 years that I was right on the practical point. I dare say I shall. I was wrong on the question you asked me. The old woman set the cup down. It was not 1 sentence. I gave him 3, and I wrote the 3rd one out for him on a card. And he has never known that. And you will not tell him. No, ma'am. Good. Lady Adeline stood and drew on her gloves. You will need a woman in that house, who knows which of the tenants lie, and there is nobody living who knows it better than I do. And I shall be at your disposal every Wednesday, and I shall be perfectly horrible about it. She was for 9 years, until she died, and she left Thomasin the fish business. They were married at Wintersill in the small church on a bright, cold day in February. Her mother wept. Her father made a speech that nobody had asked for, and that mentioned the Fenhollow acreage twice, and Thomasin let him have it, because he was going to be old soon, and there was no profit in it. Merrick Vandeleur stood up with his brother, and he had put on a stone in weight since November, and when Thomasin came up the aisle, he looked at her and gave her a very small nod that nobody else in the church saw, and that she remembered for the rest of her life. Seraphine was not there. She had gone to Lausanne in December, at her own asking and at her own arrangement, having refused the money for it from 3 separate directions, and she wrote once a month, and her letters were funny, and they got funnier for years. There was one more thing, and Thomasin found it herself, which was the only way she was ever going to believe it. It was the following autumn. She had taken over the household books at Alderforth, because the agent kept them in a way that made her teeth ache, and she was working back through the ledgers to find where a coal account had gone astray, and she came into the summer of the year before. There was an entry in June, 11 shillings, paid to an agent in Norwich on account. There was another in the 2nd week of June, and the 3rd, and the 4th. She sat in the estate room with the ledger open under the lamp, and she went through that summer week by week with her finger on the column, and it was there every week without a break. 11 shillings. Norwich on account, from the 4th week of May, straight through to the 2nd week of October, when it stopped. It had begun 4 days after she stood in his hall, and would not read the letter. He had put her sister's lodging on his own books within the week. He had gone on paying it through June and July and August, through the whole of the summer, in which he had never once asked her the question, and it had stopped in October, which was the week Seraphine came home, and there was no entry anywhere in that ledger, or any other, that would ever have told anybody, because he had never mentioned it to his agent as anything but a charitable disbursement, and the agent had never asked. Thomasin sat with her hand flat on the page. She did not go and find him that evening. She waited until December, until a night when the snow was coming against the long windows, and Merrick had gone up, and the house was quiet, and she said, without looking round from the fire, 11 shillings a week. He did not put the book down. It is a common enough figure. From the 4th week of May. Is it? You had met me once, said Thomasin. You had met me once, in a cold hall, in a grey dress, and I had refused to read you a letter, and 4 days later you began paying for my sister's lodging in Norwich, and you never told me, and you never told her, and you never told your aunt, and you went on paying it all summer, while you were sitting across a plain table from me, not asking me where the coach money came from. He turned a page. It seemed to me, he said, that somebody in this business had already paid for that girl once out of her own pocket, and that she had 6 years in her, and no more, and that if the money ran out in Norwich in August, then it would run out in Fen Hollow soon after, and I could not see the sense in that when I had 30,000 a year and no particular use for it. You could have told me. I could not, in fact. He put the book down at last and looked at her. If I had told you in June, you would have taken it as an accusation, and you would have been right. If I had told you in September, you would have taken it as a purchase. There was no week in that entire summer in which I could have said it and had it mean what it meant. And now you have found it yourself in a ledger, he said, which is the only way you were ever going to accept it, and which I have been waiting for since about March, and you have taken rather longer than I expected. She looked at him. You are an appalling man, she said. Come and sit down. The fire is better on this side. The road from Wintersill to Alderforth was 7 miles of chalk, and Thomason walked it on and off for the next 40 years in good boots. She walked it to see her mother, who came to live at the lodge in the 2nd year, and who took to singing in the kitchen there, quietly at first, and then not quietly, and who was heard doing it at 81. She walked it with 2 children, who complained about it bitterly, and grew up to walk it themselves. She walked it in the year the apple tree bore, and came back with more fruit than she could carry, and made a great deal of noise about having been right. And once a year or so, she would stop at the top of the rise where she had turned round, and she would look down at the long, pale house with the 9 windows across the front, and she would count them, because counting was steadying, and she had never lost the habit. She had gone to that house once to say she was sorry for a thing she had done on purpose, and had refused to say it in the words she was given, and had said it in her own instead. Everything else in her life had come out of that, not out of the goodness of it, out of the plainness of it, out of standing in a cold room in a gray dress with chalk on the hem and declining once, quietly, to read aloud a sentence she did not believe. Then she would come down the rise and along the drive, and he would be at the door, because Peveril would have seen her from the East Range, and told him, as Peveril did every time, until the day he could no longer manage the stairs, and as the man who came after him did for 30 years afterward.